Logic goes something like this. He said that Israel is being attacked by these Islamic forces because they don't like Western values. And he said Israel is a piece of the West, basically, and therefore the entire West is being hit by this. So therefore the West needs to come to the aid of the outpost of Israel. And this is the same logic they use today. The father of terrorism. Our modern concept of modern day terrorism actually started in Israel, and the nation was founded in 1948, very much on the back of international terrorism. And in 1974, a British journalist asked Menachem Begin, the man with the glasses, he asked him, how does it feel in the light of all that's going on to be the father of terrorism in the Middle East? And Menachem Begin, who is from Russia, said, in the Middle East, he said, in all the world. So he was taking upon himself the mantle of being the father of terrorism. He had no qualms about that. And the man in the foreground is, of course, the Prime Minister of Israel, Bibi Netanyahu, who is today the head of the same party that Mr. Begin started back in 1973. And Menachem Begin has a long history of terrorism. He was the head of the group called the Irgun in Israel, in Palestine, pre the State of Israel. And he was responsible for the bombing of the King David Hotel. There's not many photos of it. That's his handiwork there. And Menachem Begin of the Irgun and David Ben-Gurion of the Haganah ordered the bombing, which killed 93 people, including 14 British officers. Now, this particular atrocity was the worst atrocity in Israeli-Palestinian history. It killed 93 people. But what's interesting is that it's very similar to 9/11. It was in this case, what was really occurring was not just hitting the British headquarters. It was also destroying evidence that the British had collected the previous month, and the documents and the evidence they had collected would have basically ended the Zionist enterprise in Palestine because they found that the Jewish agency was involved in terror. So they had to destroy the evidence, and 9/11 was also an act in which lots and lots of evidence was destroyed. So Begin came to Israel from Russia. He arrived in Palestine in 42. He became the leader of the Irgun in 44, and then bombed the King David Hotel in 46. He also committed something called the Deir Yassin massacre, in which an entire Palestinian village was massacred, with the people were blown up inside their houses and things like that. And this was done as a spectacle in order to compel, to persuade the other Palestinians that they better leave rather than face the fate of the people of Deir Yassin. And then he became prime minister. He created the Likud. The Likud he created with his other fellow terrorists, and in 1977 he became prime minister, and then promptly invaded Lebanon. This is the emblem of his group, the Irgun, also known as Etzel. And you can see that they have this notion of a biblical state of Israel taking up a much larger piece of land than what is today Israel. This is called Eretz Israel, or the Greater Israel. And this is the notion that people from the Likud have, that they have a God-given right to the whole biblical notion of Israel as far as it could expand at any point. So it goes into Jordan, it goes into Lebanon, goes into Egypt, goes into Iraq, even goes into Saudi Arabia. And as you can see on this emblem, it says in Hebrew at the top, Rak kach, meaning only thus. The only solution is the gun. Only with the gun will we accomplish the territory that we desire. And what's interesting, in this group, the Irgun, comes from an ideology that was promoted by a man named Zev Jabotinsky. And Zev Jabotinsky created something called the New Zionist Organization. He died in 1940, Zev Jabotinsky did. He actually wrote in 1922 that there had to be built an iron wall between the Palestinian population and the Jewish population. And that's what was built after 9/11. If you recall, in 2002, 2003, Trump wants to build his wall. Well, Mr. Ariel Sharon built his wall across the Holy Land. So if you go to Bethlehem today or Jerusalem, or if you go to the West Bank, you'll see this big wall. It's 40 times longer than the Berlin Wall and twice as high. Well, what happened when Mr. Jabotinsky died in New York City is Bibi Netanyahu's father took over that organization in New York City. And his name was Ben-Zion Milakovsky Netanyahu. So Bibi Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, has been raised in this ideology. And this is what they aspire to. This is called What Israel's Future Borders Will Look Like. It's from an Israeli website. And Menachem Begin said after the partition plan in 1947, when the United Nations tried to partition Palestine, Menachem Begin said, "The partition of Palestine is illegal. Jerusalem was and will forever be our capital. And Eretz Israel will be restored to the people of Israel, all of it and forever." Now it's important to understand that this is the doctrine of the Likud party. This is the doctrine of Menachem Begin, and this is the doctrine of Bibi Netanyahu. It hasn't changed anything. So here Begin became the prime minister in 1977. This happened to be the time when I lived in Israel. And this was an earthquake in Israeli politics because the Labor Party had been in power for 30 years prior, from the birth of Israel until this time. And then these ruthless kind of terrorist guys, they created a party and they took over. They defeated the Labor Party. And my girlfriend at the time, an Israeli labor kibbutznik, she cried. She said, "This is the day that Israel died. The terrorists have taken over." So here are the troika of terrorists that took over. Menachem Begin, and on the right, Yitzhak Shamir, and on the left, Ariel Sharon. And Yitzhak Shamir, he headed another group called the Lehi, or Stern Gang. And he was responsible. His group was very, very right-wing and very militant. And they were involved in killing the United Nations envoy who was sent there to try and make peace in 1948. He was named Folke Bernadotte. He's a Swedish count there. And he was killed Bonnie and Clyde style by Yitzhak Shamir's gang outside Jerusalem. One of the members of his gang was this man's father. You might recall, this is Rahm Emanuel, the mayor of Chicago. He was also the special advisor to Bill Clinton for 8 years. And he was Barack Obama's first appointed person. He was chief of staff. And when he was chief of staff, he made a very disparaging remark about Arabs, but the media didn't seem to think that was anything, that needed to be criticized.